The Concordance Naval Institute on Station Ithara had been training officers for 211 years. Its graduation rate was 41%, the lowest of any accredited academy in the Concordance, and its alumni held command postings on every fleet that had fought in the last 3 border conflicts. It did not advertise. It did not need to. A cadet who wore the Ithara insignia had already survived the only entrance exam that mattered the first year. The institute kept records the way old institutions keep records, obsessively and mostly for themselves. Its archive listed every species that had submitted an applicant since its founding, 63 species in total. Some had produced hundreds of graduates. Some had produced one and never applied again. Humanity had produced 0. This was not an oversight in the record. It was the record. 178 years ago, the species listed in the archive as Terran's Sol system had gone silent. The event had a name in Concordance histories, the withdrawal, and a shorter name in bars near the border, where people who had actually been there did not like to talk about it. What was agreed on, across every account, was this. Humanity had fought a war it could not win, on a scale no one outside Sol system had a clear picture of, and then it had stopped answering hails. Scout ships sent in the following decade found colonies burned to the rock and orbital stations tumbling with no one aboard. Earth's transmissions ended mid-sentence. The Concordance had done what institutions do with a species that stops answering. It updated the file. Terran status, extinct. The date was 161 years ago, and no one had revised it since because no one had needed to. That was the file the admissions board at Ithara was holding when a young man walked into the registration hall carrying a duffel bag, a training spear wrapped in cloth, and an application that listed his species as Terran. His name was Cale Ashworth. He was 24, according to the paperwork, though the biological dating equipment at the medical intake station had run the scan 4 separate times because the numbers kept coming back consistent with a species that was not supposed to exist anymore to have a 24-year-old member of it. Admissions officer Ren Sabata had read the file twice. The first read had produced a result she assumed was a clerical error, a mislabeled entry, a joke, a hoax application from someone wearing an old costume for attention. The second read, after cross-referencing the boy's retinal signature against Concordance's own archived biometric records from the last confirmed human diplomatic delegation, had produced a match. Not a close match. An exact one, run through 3 independent verification systems, flagged for command-level review, and confirmed within 11 hours. The file that came back afterward did not explain very much. It confirmed a species classification. It confirmed an age. It listed an origin coordinate that corresponded to nothing in any current concordant star chart, a region that had been marked unsurveyed since the withdrawal, because ships that went looking for what was left of Sol's system generally did not come back with anything worth reporting. It did not explain where he had been for 161 years. It did not explain how he had arrived at Station Ithara with proper travel documentation, a completed application, and a training spear that medical intake had also scanned, out of an abundance of caution, and found to be constructed from an alloy that did not match anything in the current materials database. Sabata had not asked him about any of it directly. Protocol required her to forward the file to command review, not to interrogate an applicant during intake. She had asked him, instead, the standard 3 questions given to every new cadet. Where he was from, he answered with the coordinate. What brought him to Ithara, he answered. He had heard it train the best. Whether he had any questions for her, he had said no, and picked up his bag and gone to find his quarters. He did not mention that he was, as far as the Concordance's own records were concerned, the only member of his species alive. He did not mention it in his housing interview, or his placement exam, or during the 3 weeks that followed, in which he attended every scheduled class, scored in the top decile on every physical evaluation, and spoke to almost no one beyond what coursework required. He had arrived. He had found his quarters. He had gotten to work. The challenge came in the officers' mess during the third week, at a table where the fourth years sat, because the fourth years always sat together, and because that was where the informal rankings of the incoming class were assembled and enforced. Cadet Vex Thalorin was a Corving, silver-scaled, broad through the shoulders in the way Corving got when their species trained for close combat, and he was ranked first in his class, a position he had held for 3 consecutive terms. He had a reputation for being fair in the training ring and merciless everywhere else, which was, among fourth years, considered a compliment. He had heard about the Terran the way everyone had heard about the Terran, the file leak that was not supposed to have happened but had, the rumor that spread through the cadet corps faster than any official notice could catch up to. A human, an actual human, here. Some cadets thought it was a hoax. Some thought it was a publicity stunt by admissions to boost enrollment numbers from unrepresented systems. Vex did not think either. Vex had looked at the boy across 3 weeks of shared drills and formed a simpler opinion. Someone was letting a myth walk around with an unverified combat record, and myths did not belong at the top of a ranking board that Vex had spent 4 years earning. He introduced the question the way certain cadets introduce questions in a mess hall full of people who have already decided what they think. Which is to say, with the timing and tone of someone who has prepared it, days in advance, and has been waiting only for an audience large enough to make it worth asking. So, Vex said, settling into the bench across from Kale with the easy confidence of someone who has never once had to consider that a question might not land the way he intends it. Your species, extinct for 161 years, officially, on every record anyone can find. He let that sit. Several cadets nearby had gone quiet, the particular quiet of people arranging themselves to watch something. So here's my question, and it's an honest one. In 161 years of being extinct, how many kills does a dead species manage to rack up? A few cadets laughed, the low kind. The kind that happens in rooms where a hierarchy is already agreed upon, and everyone present has decided which side of it they are standing on. It was not a cruel laugh. It was the laugh of people who believed with total confidence that they already knew the answer, and the answer was 0, or close enough to 0 that the joke was self-evidently funny. Instructor Sale Voren, seated at the head of the same table, said nothing. He had pulled the boy's full command review file in the second week, the moment his clearance allowed it, and he had been waiting since then for a moment exactly like this one to arrive on its own. That's a fair question, Kale said, in the tone of someone who genuinely thought it was. He set down his fork. Do you want the confirmed number or the estimated one? They're not the same. Vex blinked, recalibrating slightly but recovered fast. Confirmed. Kale thought about it for exactly as long as it took to be accurate and no longer. 4,112, he said. That's Sol Defense Fleet's confirmed engagement record, the part of it that's mine specifically. The estimated number, including actions we couldn't verify kill confirmation on, mostly ground campaigns near the end, runs higher. Nobody's finished counting those. The mess hall did not laugh. The silence stopped the way a wave stops. The cadets closest to Kale first, their smiles going flat almost simultaneously, and then outward across the table, table by table, until the whole hall had the particular stillness of a room where everyone is doing the same math, and none of them like where it is landing. Vex's smile held for another 2 seconds before it started to slide. That's not a real number, he said. There's no fleet record that size for a species that's been gone for 160 years. There is, Instructor Voren said. It was the first thing he had said since sitting down. He set down his own utensils, and there was nothing neutral left in his voice at all. I pulled it myself 3 weeks ago, once his file cleared review. I was waiting for the right moment to show the class. I believe this is it. He tapped his data slate. The wall display behind the serving line, usually reserved for mess announcements and duty rosters, flickered and resolved into a document header that made several cadets sit up straighter. A classified concordance intelligence file, cross-stamped with an authorization only a command track instructor could pull. The footage that followed was not dramatic in the way academy training simulations were dramatic, all clean edits and heroic framing. It was documentary, grainy in places, shot from fixed hull cameras and helmet recorders, time-stamped in a calendar system the room had to be told was Terran military standard. The first clip showed an orbital defense line above a colony called New Meridian, holding against a Skarn raiding force 3 times its listed strength, for 11 hours, until reinforcements that never should have arrived on time arrived on time. Voron paused it on a single fighter, call sign painted in human characters across its hull, and said only, "That's him. He was 17. The second clip was ground footage, night vision, a defensive action at a place the caption called the Ashfall Corridor. Humanity's last confirmed evacuation root off a colony that fell 3 months later. Vex was not smiling anymore. He was watching with the expression of someone running a calculation that was clearly going to take longer than the rest of the class period to finish. The third clip showed something the room had not been braced for. Not combat, but its aftermath. A field hospital, humans and non-humans both being carried through the same doors. Kale, visibly younger, helping carry a wounded Skarn soldier off a stretcher that had room for only one more person, choosing to leave a weapon behind rather than a life. The fourth clip was the last transmission the Concordance had on file from Sol Command, sent 161 years ago, requesting that any allied species monitoring the frequency evacuate non-combatant coalition personnel still present in the system, because Sol Fleet did not expect to hold the line much longer. It ended mid-sentence. Voron let the silence after it run for a full 10 seconds before he spoke again. Sol system did not go extinct because it stopped fighting, he said. It went extinct by our record, because it stopped being able to transmit. Those are not the same thing, and this institute has taught that they were for 161 years because no one who survived ever told us otherwise. Until now, by the 8th case study, no one in the hall was smiling. Kale had not spoken once during the footage. He sat with his hands folded on the table, watching the same recordings the rest of the room was watching, with the specific stillness of someone who had lived through the events on screen and was now, for the first time, watching them from the outside. The mess hall emptied slowly, the way rooms empty after something has happened in them that people need time to file away before they can talk about it normally again. Vex was one of the last to move. He stopped near the door, not looking back at the table, and said the only thing he had left that was honest. 4,000 and the estimate are different by a lot, he said. I should have asked which number before I asked the question. But he left without waiting for a response, and no one in the hall thought less of him for it. It was not a walk of shame. It was the walk of someone recalculating a framework that had held for 4 years and had just been shown, in 9 minutes, to have a hole in it he had not known was there. Kale gathered his tray, and beneath his arm, the training spear he had carried in with him 3 weeks earlier. The one medical intake had never been able to identify the alloy of. He had said, when asked, that it had belonged to his father, and that it was the only thing that had made the trip with him besides the file. Voron caught him at the door before he reached it. Since the second week, Voron said, I've known what was in that file. I could have shown the class the day I read it. I waited. Why? Kale said. Not a challenge. A genuine question, asked the same way he had answered Vex's plainly because he wanted to know. Because a number means nothing on its own, Voron said. It needed the room to ask first. Kale nodded once, and did not say anything else, and walked out toward the training hall, because the evening's practical session started in 20 minutes, and he did not intend to be late for it. He had not looked back at the wall display, still holding on the final frozen frame of Sol Command's last transmission. He had not lingered to watch what the room did with what it had just learned. The war was 30 years behind him, and the war was not why he had come to Ithara. He had come to train, the same as anyone else in that hall, and the file could speak for itself now. Vorin stood by the door a while longer, watching the last of the cadets file out in a silence none of them had chosen, and all of them understood. Then he walked back to his office, opened the term's cadet performance record, found the entry for Ashworth K. 3 weeks old, mostly blank, and under the field marked instructor notes, wrote 3 words.